Everyone talks about two ways to get rich: building a massive business and then living super frugally and investing everything. But there's a third way that no one really talks about, and it's how we went from broke students to nearly 2 million invested. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized all of your favorite people are probably doing it too. So let me tell you how I figured this out. About 5 years ago, when me and my partner decided to walk away from our first business, that was really successful on paper. We were making good money. We were doing multi-six figures in revenue. We had enough to be paying ourselves both a full-time salary. We had left our corporate jobs to do it, and we were even working with the top athletes in the sport. But the reality really hit us when we felt like we zeroed out financially. We'd been building the business and pouring back into it, and we just hit a point where it felt like we hadn't really moved forward. We were staring at a bank account where we owed credit cards, and we didn't have anything really left in saving. The reality was we had worked our butts off for years, and it didn't really feel like we had something to show for it. Even though we had that successful business, it felt like personally we were so burnt out and run down and actually hadn't gotten anywhere closer to our financial goals. We knew that was sometimes a part of being in business, but it really forced us to stop and think about how we wanted to move forward. That's when we really started looking at and posing the question, how are other people getting rich? The first way we saw people getting rich was the traditional way of building a massive business. I came from a tech background, so I had friends in the startup world, and it looked like looking for funding, trying to build that unicorn business, and really building out a big team and taking big risks. When you're in the startup world, you're looking at making a massive business and then making an exit. So obviously there's pros with this, which will be the payout that you get. And for a lot of people, it's that satisfaction of building something huge. There's also a lot of cons that stare you in the face on that side of things. Like, they really consume you, and a lot of people lose their personal lives or their health really takes a hit while building these. And honestly, most of them fail. That's part of the risk involved. So then we started looking at the flip side, this extreme frugality. We started consuming more content from people who were on track to retire early. Most of them lived off the same premise of invest as much as possible and live off as little as possible, both in the now so that you can make those investments, but also later, because if you can live off less, you obviously have to have less invested to make it happen. Now, the math worked for us with that one, but the vibes were kind of off. I've never really connected with people that have this really cheap and stingy frugal mentality. Definitely there's ways that I love to save. I love a good sale when it comes to things like clothing, but I don't like the idea of constantly penny pinching, booking crazy flights just to avoid extra charges, and doing these kind of things like driving across town to save money on a cheaper gas station, or maybe living in a super small apartment just for the sake of saving money. And honestly, what's the point of financial freedom if you don't ever spend your money? Now, the problem was we looked at both of these, and while both of them we could understand the appeal and how it worked to actually get rich, it didn't feel like the right fit for us. So that left us thinking about which one was more appealing, and the honest answer was neither. So while we couldn't really land on either direction, we knew we were feeling really tired from trying to build a big business, and we weren't so attracted to the super frugal, so we just decided to do something different with our business this time. We thought about, what if we focused on being able to be as profitable as possible in these businesses without having to work so hard overtime? So that's what we did. We started building with an entirely new philosophy, and instead of focused on just scaling as fast as possible, we really focused on profitability and staying lean. Josh got into his real estate career, and we were generating leads at $0 using social media. And I started doing coaching and consulting, which I had already been doing a bit, but really building it up into workshops and programs online. Now, in both of these businesses, it's really easy to get caught up in scaling. On the real estate side, we see people do massive deals and make massive teams. And on my end of things, you can quickly end up with a team of 15 people and so many different softwares that you're paying for before you even realize. So even though we were building businesses, we were no longer focused on building something massive to exit. And while we weren't doing the super frugal side, we took that lesson of how can we invest as much as possible, but instead of trying to live off as little as possible, we just decided to make more money in our businesses so we had more money to invest. The irony with this was it was kind of contradicting most of the advice out there. We weren't doing everything we could to scale the business as massive as possible. And then on the flip, we weren't living as frugally as possible in order to invest as much as possible. In our business, we were focusing on questions like, how can we put in as much as possible right now to get as much back out, instead of what is the sustainable, scalable product? And then on the investing side, we were still spending. We were traveling, we were taking the much needed vacations, because we had learned from the first business how much we needed to prioritize still living life and enjoying. It honestly felt really good, and it almost felt like we had unlocked this cheat code, because it was going against the two traditional ways we've seen to get rich, but it felt like this really nice middle ground. So I started to look more if I could find other case studies of this, and I started to notice a pattern. There were a lot more people taking this hybrid approach than I realized. Before, it felt like when you're looking for a yellow car and you see a yellow car, we were seeing the startup founders and we were seeing the content creators who were being very frugal with their investments. Then when I started looking closely, a lot of the business owners and the people that I really looked up to weren't scaling massive companies, but they had this really nice balance that they were building their businesses while still living their life and in the background making these investments. You just don't see all three of those things happening when you're looking at it at the surface level. Part of this is because they're often the people who are moving a little bit more in silence, or at least quieter. And then the other part is some of these people are actually talking about either camp. They're either talking about the business they're building or they're talking about the investments they're making. But what we're not realizing is that most of them are actually doing both. Look at it this way. Take someone like Cody Sanchez or Alex Hermosi, who are major thought leaders in the business space right now. Those people are also making investments. They're just not talking about it. You can't tell me that they don't have investments in the stock market, most likely real estate, definitely in other people's businesses. They're making those investments. And then on the flip, a lot of the creators you follow that are making investment content have made a business out of it. So while they're sharing how they're making this money from investing, they're usually selling courses or budgeting templates or making money from their brand partnerships. So they're also doing a business in the background. It's just one or the other ends up being louder. So what I really realized was this hybrid approach is all around us. It's just not that sexy to call out, but it's actually way more fun to live by and way more efficient. So instead of just creating a business or just doing investing, we look at it as creating an entire flywheel. Now, if you only focus on a business, you're putting all your eggs in one basket and maybe not moving forward unless it works out. And if you only focus on investing and you're not building a business, honestly, you can only invest so much off a standard salary that a business really is the way to speed that up. So they really work off of each other. So it really becomes this cycle and this flywheel where your business provides you more cash to be able to make those investments. And then every investment you make makes you more secure because those assets are traditionally more predictable than a business. The stock market has average returns every year. Real estate also has averages, and it's a lot easier and more predictable to figure out. So it's creating that stability that even if the business doesn't work out, you've at least moved the needle forward for your personal finances. But we're also not giving up on the business because it's the thing that's gonna bring in the most cash to invest. Think of it as that first business, maybe you're making 100K or less. It's gonna give you a bit of money to start investing in the stock market. And then you're going to continue to build that business, put a little more energy into it, maybe focus on a really high profit year. Maybe you're doing those more profitable activities. Like for myself, it could be hosting an extra workshop or running a group program, taking on more one-on-one clients, but we're doing things that are going to increase that profit. For Josh in real estate, it could be actively doing more marketing to get more listings or more buyers. So you're going to focus on growing that business more, and then the investments can get bigger and bigger. And once you have a nice nest egg in those investments, or like us, a split of real estate and traditional stock investments, it allows you to start diversifying, which is cool. So we can put some money into crypto because now it's less risky to do so. We can invest in our friend's company because now we can take that risk for a big payoff on the investment side, but it's less risky because the business will continue to carry us if that doesn't work out. And now I'm at a point where I feel a lot more secure in those investments, that I'm actually doing things like starting to build out an app with friends. And I'm able to do this without totally sacrificing my lifestyle, and I actually have the energy to put into it. But I also have that safety net that now is a time that I can focus on building something like that without it taking over my life, or without having to spend the next 2 decades of my life risking it, not knowing if it'll work out, and potentially landing at zero. If it doesn't work out, I actually am in a really great place still. And we still get to live life at the same time. We still get to book trips, we get to pick the nice hotels, and we have that consistent base coming in. So it's honestly the best of all worlds. Now, a lot of the times we talk about these concepts, but what does it actually look like in action? And I can tell you, for us, we started doing this about 5 years ago, and it is the reason we were able to buy a house a year for 3 years in a row, then shifted our focus to the stock market, where we were able to unlock over $1 million invested in stocks. And most exciting to me, we were able to grow our total investments by over 50%, Okay, so I was just editing this video and realized I never came back to finish this thought. What I wanted to say is that we have grown our investments by an average of 50% every year for the last 4 years. Now, here's the thing. There's always going to be a catch, right? With the startup side, I'd say the biggest catch that I've realized actually years after doing that initial research is that you actually don't always get the big payout that you think. That $20 million payout for a founder might actually end up being only $2 million in their pockets. And $2 million sounds great, but they put in a lot of work for that to just be $2 million. Then on that frugal side, people often end up going back to work. As humans, we crave that sense of fulfillment and purpose, and we want to have an impact. So a lot of these people that I've researched that went and retired early actually find themselves back in a job simply because they weren't finding life as fulfilling living the way that they had planned. Okay, so what's really fun with this is that this third approach kind of solves both of those. You're always building, so you stay more fulfilled, you're having that impact, but you're able to do it without burning out because you can operate in these seasons and you have more of that safety net. You're always investing, so no matter what, while you're building, you're moving the needle forward. So this third way obviously kind of counters both of those. You don't have the big risk of not getting the end result you want from the startup founders because you've been investing that whole way. So it's been building and compounding and really moving the needle forward in the background. And then on the flip, you're actually still building, you're still a business owner, so you're getting that sense of fulfillment and purpose, and you can have whatever impact you want, so it doesn't really have that same risk of these people that feel lost after they've retired. And obviously the cherry on top is that you get to live and enjoy your life along the way without having to penny pinch. Now, I always want to be transparent, so when I thought about what is the catch with this third way, I really think the catch is that it feels counterintuitive and it just feels kind of weird. The driven side of you wants, and maybe that ego side, but the driven side of you wants to have that big impact, and it's so tempting to build a big business. And we have a lot of narratives of traditional success around business in our mind, whether that's how much your business is growing in revenue every year, maybe building team or having office space, or even recognition. So you're constantly battling that internal desire to build for the sake of building. It's kind of like you're not in the top of your class on either ends of it. You're not the person that's living so frugally and investing so crazy that it's wildly impressive. And then on the flip, you're not the CEO of this massive company or raising maybe insane amounts of money that's super impressive on paper. So it kind of feels like, as someone who's probably been like an A student or an overachiever in what they do, you're leaning more into that jack of all trades. And that, I think, in itself feels kind of weird and counterintuitive. You're also going to be exposed to way more examples of those two camps and less of seeing those people doing this third approach. So it feels like you're constantly battling that inner voice that you should be doing something differently. That's what I found the most challenging for it myself, is there's always this voice in my head that says, are you using this as an excuse to just not build a thing or not go out after that big thing? Or maybe you can't even build the big thing, so you're just saying you're trying not to build it. And then on the flip, maybe I'm just scared to retire. Maybe I'm scared that I will run out of money, or that that system doesn't work, or I won't be living up to my full potential. So I think for this third option, it takes even more personal growth and mental gymnastics than the other two combined, because you're kind of living in all three of those worlds. You have to figure out how to invest as much as possible. You have to figure out how to build a successful business, even if you're not going for a mega business. And then on top of it, you have to work through a lot of the insecurities and natural hesitations that might come with it. But that's really where the magic is you get to do that personal growth, you get to live your best life while you're doing it, still build a business that you can have impact and be proud of, and you're building those investments for future you and to give current you more choice and more ability to take risks if you want to. Now, we're in our early 30s and we are on track to hit 2 million invested very soon, maybe by the time you're watching this video, and that's just gonna keep growing. We're on track to retire by 40, but also having really cool experiences now, like a few upcoming trips to the Philippines, Tulum, and Singapore. This is just one of the interesting ways I've figured out how to make money work better for you after studying different people. But if you wanna learn even more about it and learn directly from the people we've been chatting with and observing, we're actually putting together a community that's going to be having these deeper money conversations about how you can get more creative and more strategic with your investments. I love to learn from other people, and I feel I've been so lucky to be exposed and introduced to so many incredible people, both in the business and investing space, and I'm really excited to bring you those conversations that they're not necessarily having publicly. If you're curious about getting involved in the community, I'm going to leave some information below, and I would love to see you inside.